You ready for me to admit
All right.
everyone? Here we go.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. We're letting people get in. This is binding off. We're going to cover a whole bunch of different ways to bind off today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, welcome.
Got a few more people I see connecting, so I'm just going to wait another minute and then we'll get started. All right. All right, should we go ahead and go?
Yeah, I think we're okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Nielsen, and we have Laura also with us, and we are going to do binding off today. So we've got a lot that we want to show you. We're just packing it in there. So bear with us. Remember that you can catch the recordings. And we just kind of want to give you a sampling of things to think about when you're binding off. And yeah, so we will get started. Laura's going to be giving away some gift certificates too later. Do you want to talk about those now, Laura, or wait till the middle? We'll
Sure.
wait till the middle. Go ahead.
Sure, not a problem. This is kind of the companion piece to last week's How Do I Cast On? This is sort of the other half, How Do I Bind Off? I just went ahead and put our YouTube channel in the chat. That's where we've got all of those videos of past sessions. Tonight, we're going to be giving away two $20 gift cards. We're going to give those away into the chat, and we're going to randomize things tonight. So we're going to pick a specific number, and I will tell you before we start the questions, but we're going to pick a specific number respondent who has the right answer. So it's not always going to be the first person. It might be the third or the fifth. And what we'll do is I will give you a second to get your chat windows open when we do that. And then I will ask a question based on something that occurred earlier in the presentation. So pay attention. And these, like I said, these will be available afterwards on our YouTube if you want to go back. A lot of the cast-ons that Suzanne will be demonstrating have lots of little steps. And so if you miss any step, you can go back and watch the videos on our YouTube channel. Those usually go up later the same evening, or they'll go up tomorrow. So I'll turn it back to Suzanne now.
All right. We'll get started right away because we do have a lot. And let me switch over to my hands here. All right, so we just wanted to quickly show just what the regular, a normal cast off is. So for a regular cast off, you would normally just knit, well, let's say knit two, and then take the first one and pass it over the stitch that's on the needle. And that's probably your most basic cast off. So I think a lot of people are familiar with that one. But what do you do if it says cast off in pattern? That's kind of a question that we get sometimes. So to cast off in pattern, it means that you just follow what the stitch is. So if I'm casting off in pattern in stockinette, I see a knit stitch, and so I knit that stitch. And then I still pass the stitch over the stitch that's there. So I see a knit one, and I pass the stitch over. So that's the same, but now I see a purl stitch. So if it tells me to cast off in pattern, it would mean you would bring the yarn to the front and purl the purls that you see, and then you still take the stitch over. And then now I see a knit stitch, so I would knit that one, take the yarn over, but now I see a purl stitch, so I would purl it, bring the yarn over. And when you're in ribbing, if you do cast off in pattern, it does make it slightly stretchier than it would if you just did all knits, because the ribbing is a little bit more stretchy, but still not much. So what most people, kind of want to do is often have a stretchier bind off. And so what do you do for stretchier bind off? Oh, I have a garter section here. So this, even though these kind of look like purls, I would still bind off knit wise because I would be knitting to be in pattern. But anyway, I'm going to go
over. that asked if
Yes.
we could show it what it looks like if you're throwing and not picking. Is
Yes,
that
maybe
something
I
you
can
can do?
always throw. Slows me down a little because I am not a thrower and I'm a little awkward at that, but we can do it. I can do it. So I'll just do a couple. So I would go into the stitch knitwise. Sorry, knit the stitch. Okay, knit the stitch and then still take your yarn over the top. Okay. So to make something a little bit more stretchy, there's several different ways, and I'm going to show you a couple of them. And we'll talk about some more. So this one is just called like a stretchy bind off. So in this one, let's see, start kind of from the beginning. Well, let's pretend like let's pretend we're at the beginning here. So I just have all my stitches on the needle. So at the beginning, you would go ahead and knit one, and then you would knit another one to get 2 stitches on your needle. But then you put those stitches back on the left needle and knit them together through the back loop. Okay, so and then when you're here, so now the repeat becomes you knit one, and then, oh gosh, I'm like half throwing, half picking here. But you put them back on your left needle and knit them together through the back loop. So I make sure that I'm.
You're better than I am, because I'm not sure I could demonstrate both throwing and picking.
Again, so we'll do a knit and then place them both onto the left needle and knit them together through the back loop. You don't actually have to take your yarn out. Let's do one more and we'll see if we can see how stretchy that one looks. So knit it, place them both onto the left-hand needle and knit them together through that back loop. All right, let's take a look at it. So from the top, it does look, like my loops are maybe just a little bit bigger. And we can see that it's just a little bit stretchier than a regular knit bind off. So that's one way. Another way is to just, let's see, you would knit. Let's see, should we start over again? And yeah, I don't know if you can see much, but this one is a bit stretchier in that it goes back and you can stretch it compared to this one. But sometimes you do want a firmer edge. So you do have to think about, what you want in your knitting bind off. So let's see. There's that one, what do we call the lace one? The lace one is we would knit the stitch first. So we would knit it and then place them back. That's the one I just did. That's just,
yeah.
Sorry, help me out, Laura. What's the
that one's the elastic bind off.
Elastic bind off.
The lace bind off is you just knit 2 together and then put the stitch back on the needle and then you knit 2 together.
Do you do it through the front or the back? Does it matter?
I think through the front.
I think through the front. So we would start out, we would just knit 2 together and then place it back.
Yeah, I think so.
And knit 2 together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm bad at the terminologies, but this one is called off, I believe.
Yeah, the lace bind off.
And we can look at
when knitting the stretchy
that
bind off and slipping them back onto the left-hand needle, does it matter if you slip them knitwise or purlwise?
It does somehow. And I've seen like there's several different cast off and some of them, do it differently. So I would test it out a little bit and see which way you like it for your particular thing. Also, often when you're binding off, the right side or say the wrong side will look better than the right side. So sometimes you want to, pay attention and you might want to bind off when you're on the wrong side so that your right side looks better. I know some people like that with Jenny's stretchy bind off. which I can show you that one too. I would say my go-to one is the stretchy bind off. So if I really want a stretchy one, I often do this. I just knit the stitch or purl it if I'm working in pattern, and then put them both together on the needle and knit them through the back loop. I would say that's of my go-to for stretchy bind off. We are going to also show the Icord bind off, which I'll talk about that more later, and also a tubular bind off, which is really stretchy. And so we'll show you that after the break. But I want to stick with ones that we can do just like your normal knitting. So one is the Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. So people have heard of that one a lot. And in that one, you actually make this loop. You do a reverse yarn over before you do your stitch, and then you knit the stitch, and then you pull both of those loops over. So that's another way. So here, I'll try and do it with throwing, because it is a little strange in that you do this reverse. So you do this reverse yarn over, and then you just knit the stitch. And then you take both the yarn over and that first stitch and pull over. So that makes a nice one. And that one, I'll do one more. Sorry, so we do this reverse yarn over and then knit. And then take both of these over.
Well, and the point of having a stretchy bind off is because you want some give, particularly in items that are going to fit you. I mean, we talk about sock cuffs where you want them to be snug enough to stay up on your leg, but you also want them to be loose enough that you can get them over the widest part of your heel. Sort of the same thing about your hats. But also think about when you knit a lace shawl and when you're binding off the lace, the shawl looks like a crumpled piece of I don't know what, and then you block it out and it expands so beautifully. And if you bind off too tightly on your edge, you know, it really looks like it's tight and it may not stretch as nicely as you might like it. So that's why we would use the lace or elastic bind off for those kinds of things.
And elastic is really good because it stretches and goes back. You wouldn't want to just like bind off with a lot larger needles, although that's a trick you can use. But then it would maybe stretch, but it wouldn't spring back. So that's where you want that elastic part of the bind off. You want it to like stretch and come back.
I did get a question about whether we're going to cover when it's advisable to use which bind off. I'm trying to give you some examples when you would want to use more elastic bind offs versus less elastic. A lot of patterns will tell you what to use. For instance, a lot of Stephen West patterns always use an I-cord bind off at the edges, which we will be covering later. A lot of times they'll just say bind off all stitches, which means it can just be a regular bind off, you know, knit one, pull one loop over the other, or you can decide if you want your edge to be a little bit stretchier, what you want to do. So again, places that you'd want stretch would be sock cuffs, hat brims, necks on sweaters, because you don't want to, I tech edited a pattern today that only had 10 inches circumference at the neck. And I said, I'm sorry, that's not going to get over anyone's head. So you're going to have to rewrite that. So you would definitely, and no amount of stretchy bind off would help that one. But but you do want things to be a little stretchy, but also snap back so that they're snug when you're wearing them, because of course you don't want your brim to be huge if you're wearing a hat, because then your hat will fall down on your face. The other thing that I can tell you, which is sometimes a trick, if you find that you knit very tightly and you bind off very tightly, one simple way to have a slightly looser bind off is to go up a couple needle sizes. So if you're knitting a project on size 6s and you find yourself pulling it really tight and you really want it to be kind of a loose bind off at the edge, you could go up to 7s or 8s to finish. So that's just kind of a tip or trick no matter what bind off you're using.
Yes. Yeah, I thought of something else I was going to add there for a second, but anyway, we're going to still cover the I-cord bind off. And then but let's take a break and do the giveaway. Are you ready, Laura?
We can. I don't have a ton of questions after.
Oh yeah, should we do Icord first?
Yeah, let's do Icord.
Okay, we'll do Icord. All right, so for I-cord, it's when you really want a very decorative border. So because you can really see the I-cord, and I have a couple samples here to show ones that have the I-cord bind off. So this is the Strolling on Cloud 9, which I've shown a lot before, but this is an I-cord bind off. So it looks really professional and nice. You can also make I-cord edging. You can also do an I-cord cast on. And then, you can like make a border around the whole thing, which is kind of fun. These are the Stitch School mitts. And I do an I-cord bind off around the thumb hole just to make a nice clean bind off around that thumb hole. So those are some, or there's the blanket. We're doing a knit along with the, I'll show this on here.
This is the Stephen West Painting Honeycombs blanket.
Yes.
So
and I-cord.
Yes.
I-cord cast on, edging, and bind off. So it does it all the way around. And I'm not even probably going to be able to find which one is the cast on and cast off edge right here, but you can see.
I can tell you the pink is going to be the cast off edge.
Okay, good. I got it right.
Well, only because I know which order I knit the colors in.
Because you did. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, so this is the bind off edge. So I will show you that I-cord bind off. So for an I-cord, I find it's usually 3 stitches. Looks nice. Is that what you did, Laura?
For that one, yes, that's 3 stitches. I usually find it depends on what weight yarn you're knitting in.
Yeah.
But most often it's 3 stitches, and most patterns will tell you if that's what they want you to do. You can obviously add it to anything you'd like. The I-cord gives you a slightly firmer edge than some of the elastic bind offs, although it is still stretchy as long as you're not pulling it too tight. And the nice thing is that it's a really finished rounded edge. And because it's like an I-cord, there's no real right side to it. So it just looks like it folds under, and it hides any imperfections in your edge. Like if you're changing yarn colors or you're doing some kind of striping or various things, it just hides all of that because it's just kind of applied right to the edge.
No. So I'm going to get going because this one you have to do a little setup for. So it depends on the pattern. Like I have a couple patterns where I had the edge that's an I-cord edging goes straight into the bind off. So that would be a little bit different, but it'll show you that in the pattern. But just for a typical, everyday I-cord, you need 3 extra stitches. So what you need to do is cast on 3 stitches to start your bind off. I know that sounds really weird, but what happens—
And that's the knitted cast on that we demonstrated last week.
Yes, I use the knitted. You can use different ones, but this was a nice, easy one. And then what happens is these 3 stitches are going to form the I-cord that's going to travel across the bind off. So then for the I-cord bind off, it's knit 2 and then knit 2 together through the back loop. Okay, and then you take all of these 3 stitches and place them back on the left needle and do it again. So that's the repeat. So you knit 2 and then knit 2 together through the back loop.
Yeah, the only difference between that and knitting an I-cord is basically that on the last stitch, you're knitting it with one of the stitches from your worked piece so that it basically applies it to the edging.
Yes. So knit 2 together through the back loop. And you can start to see how my I-cord is traveling across the top of the work. And then once you get to the end, once you get until you only have 3 stitches left, then you just bind those off any way you want to. And then they kind of roll together and hide. So it makes a really nice clean edge, like Laura said, that just folds under. So here's the wrong side of that, and then here's the right side of the I-cord bind off. It is pretty firm. I wouldn't call it quite as stretchy as some others, but it's very decorative.
We had a question if someone can do the knit two together just a smidge slower. She said she can't see
Yes.
what's happening in the back.
Yes, sorry. Let me get maybe my other needles and find. These to be a little less glary if I use the wooden ones. All right, let's kind of start over here. So if I were going to go into Icord, again, you start with casting on. I'll pretend that that's one cast on already. Cast on 3 stitches, or however many stitches the pattern says your Icord is, or however wide you want it to be. Even like a 2-stitch Icord I find looks pretty good sometimes, but I would say 3. So knit, and then knit the second one, and then take this one. So I'm going through both stitches, through the back loop on both stitches. So it's knit 2 together through the back loop. And it does need to be through the back loop to get it to lay flat. If you do it through the front, then I'll show you on this one, I'm going to knit 2. If I did it this way, it wouldn't lay as nice. So that's why we knit through the back. So
yeah, basically you want your stitch on your, I have to reverse this because I'm left-handed, which is why I don't show you these demonstrations. So you want your stitch of your I-cord to lay over the stitch on your finished piece to kind of block it and make it look like a nice edge.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing an I-cord, bind off on a blanket, connecting the beginning with edging stitches. The best way to do that is to Kitchener them together. So if, for instance, I will tell you right now on the knit along that we're doing with the honeycomb blanket or the painted honeycomb blanket, you have let me just do one thing. Let me just add okay, I need to spotlight myself so I can show you with my hands what I mean, but of course my screen is not. Let me go back to the previous
video. All right, I'll take maybe if I take mine off.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so what happens in the painting honeycombs blanket, you do an I-cord cast on at the bottom, and then you're going to have 3 stitches on either side of your blanket, and you're going to run these I-cord stitches up the blanket. And then you are going to cast off on your I-cord, and you're going to cast off across the top. And eventually your 3 stitches for your I-cord cast off and your 3 stitches for your I-cord side are going to meet together at this corner. And what I do at that corner is I Kitchener the 3 stitches together. So just like I were finishing a sock, I just Kitchener those together and then I weave in my tails. So that creates the perfect finish. Now, if you don't have 3 on this side waiting where you can kind of join them together, or you could even join them in the middle if you wanted to. If you don't have the other 3, then you'll just bind those 3 off and kind of weave in your tail and pull it up against whatever you have on this side.
Yeah, and the 3 stitches at the beginning, like so in the blanket for the question, the first 3 stitches form the edge of the I-cord. They form that I-cord edge, so you don't have to cast on extra 3. But Correct. Sometimes to get it to like go around that corner, you'll just I-cord like 2 rows maybe to kind of make it so it doesn't like just, I don't know, not make a corner. You want to give it a little bit of a round.
Yeah, my standard treatment at the corner is to add 1 extra row where I'm not actually attaching to the project itself, but just add 1 row of just plain I-cord and then go back again. Just so it's got a little bit extra, but the pattern goes into how to do that. So I'm kind of answering this generally, how you would meet up 2 sections.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Jackie asked if you've already bound off and you don't like how it looks, can you pick up and then bind off an I-cord? And certainly that's a great idea to do it. If you don't want to like unpick and take it out, you can just pick up stitches and then just I-cord. You can even do like an applied I-cord, which would be like, as you're working the I-cord, you would kind of pick up a stitch and knit it together. So yeah, that's
the other way to do that. We talked about this last week. The other way to do that would be to do a provisional cast on for those 3 stitches. So you
Yes.
provisionally cast on the 3 stitches, however you want to do that. And then you have those 3 stitches that are live at the end. So when you get all the way back around to the end, you can graft those together and it will look seamless, like you just have an entire I-cord all the way around.
Yep. And that's kind of what I did on these mitts, because it is kind of all the way around. And in this one, you know, it just depends on what you want to do. I actually cheated a little and I just cast on 3 stitches, but then when I got back around, I had the 3 live stitches and I kind of grafted those to the cast on stitches. So, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, can still make it look seamless. But
okay, now let's give away our gift cards.
Okay, sorry.
So I have 2 $20 gift cards. I'll do them one at a time. Each one will be a question. For the first question, I'm going to pick the 3rd person with the right answer. I'm vamping here, so you have time to open your chat window. The way you do this is you respond in chat. The 3rd person that responds with the correct answer will be the winner, and then we'll tell you how to get in touch with Roxanne to claim your gift card. So what was the very first bind off that Suzanne demonstrated?
That was a long time ago.
It was. Okay, the 3rd person with the correct answer. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to 5 because the first 2 were incorrect. So Jackie Vandenberg, the regular bind off, you are the winner. Go ahead and select in the chat Zen Yarn Garden down at the bottom and send her your email address and she will send you your gift card.
Yay.
So, second question. Ready? Get your chat ready. What is the bind off that Suzanne showed that's on the edge of her strolling on cloud 9 cowl?
Ooh.
And I'll take the 3rd person.
Good one.
3rd is, wait, whoop, my screen is going really fast. 3rd is Carrie Vincent. So Carrie, go ahead and select Zen Yarn Garden in the chat window, send her your information, and she will send you your gift card. So now we're going to go back to Suzanne and we are going to, oops, we got kind of close to the end.
I know, I'm going to go really fast here.
Yeah, we're going to demonstrate the tubular bind off. And this is the matching bind off to our tubular bind on, or tubular cast on that we did last time.
All right, so for tubular, this is the tubular cast on, which looks just so professional, we decided. So if you'll remember, when we did the cast on, we had to do the cast on and then we did 2 setup rows. So that's what we have to do kind of in reverse. So I'm going to do the setup rows first, and I already got started. So the setup row is just like the setup rows in the cast on. Actually, you have to knit 1 and then bring the yarn to the front and slip 1 purlwise, bring the yarn to the back and knit 1. So we're just working every other stitch here. So knit 1, bring the yarn to the front, slip 1 purlwise. So we're knitting the knits and we're slipping the purls. Knit the knits, slip the purls. Now since my sample here is flat, I would turn my work and then work backwards. And now it's actually exactly the same. It's knit the knits and slip the purls. But if you remember kind of stitch anatomy, this stitch that's a knit on the wrong side was a purl on the right side. So it was getting slipped in my last row, and now I'm working it. And so hopefully that's not too confusing. So I'm going kind of fast here.
What is this one?
This is going to be the tubular bind off.
Oh, okay.
So this is the setup rows, the second setup row. And if you're working in the round, this you do still need 2 setup rows, but the second setup row, you would have to actually purl your stitches instead of knitting them. So I'll show you that quick when I get to this other side. And slip. All right, so now I've done 2 setup rows. and then I'll show. But if I were working in the round, remember you're on the right side for both rows. So if you're working in the round, you do have to do, you would bring your yarn to the front, or sorry, you would first leave it in the back. You would slip a knit stitch and bring it to the front and then purl that stitch all the way across. But sorry, I know I'm going really fast here. So now this part is you do need to cut your yarn and use a darning needle for the rest, because what's going to happen is the knit stitches are going to get Kitchener stitched to the purl stitches. So you can kind of visualize it in that all of the knit stitches are coming forward and all of the purl stitches are going to be like on a back needle. But we don't have to have it on two separate needles. We can do it all at once. And so I'm going to show you how to do it all at once. Here I have my notes from last time. So you can kind of imagine that you have knit stitches that are the V's, and every other stitch is a purl stitch. So if I line those up a little bit better. So I have a knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch. So you can kind of think of those as being on the back needle. And what happens is, you know, the opposite of a purl stitch, the back side of a purl stitch is a knit. And so what happens is your purl stitches kind of fold around and you're Kitchenering the tops of them together so that they do that flow into each other. Okay, sorry, I know this is like super fast explanation.
Well, don't rush. I mean, I'm sure we can take 5 minutes.
Go over a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So you do need to cut your yarn. They say leave about 4 times the length of what you want to bind off, and that's kind of a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, because it's Kitchener, this bind off will consume quite a bit in terms of yarn.
Yes, so it actually kind of leaves a stitch in between. If you're doing Kitchenering in the round, the only change that you make is take the first 2 stitches and put a locking stitch marker through those stitches. So before you start, just take those 2 stitches and put them on a stitch marker. And that will help you if you're binding off in the round, that will help. You don't need to do this if you're not binding off in the round, but just to show you why, I'll leave those on there. All right, so now we're going to Kitchener stitch. So if you kind of remember the flow, it's a little even easier because we don't have to remember if we're on the front needle or the back needle. It's going to be obvious. So if you see a knit column, which my edge stitch is a knit stitch, and even though it doesn't look like a funky column, it'll look more normal when we get to the next one. You're going to knit it off because it's a knit column. So knit it off, but leave it on your darning needle, and then we're going to skip this, skip 1 stitch, and then go through the next stitch purlwise. So go through the next knit column purlwise, and then we'll pull our yarn. All right. Leave that there. So now my next stitch that's coming up is a purl stitch. So I'm going to go through it purlwise and take it off. So purlwise off, and now I need to work on this, the second purl stitch. So I need to go knitwise through this purl stitch, but I need to skip the stitch that's there. So what we're going to do is go between the stitches. So we're skipping that knit column and then going knitwise. I know it's hard to see, but I'm going knitwise through this purl stitch and then pull the yarn. And I'll do that several times so that you can see what's going on here and just make sure it doesn't get hooked around there. All right, so now I see a knit stitch. I see a knit column on my needle that's coming up next. So I'm going to go knitwise through that stitch and then skip the purl stitch and go purlwise through the next. So if you know, the way that you see Kitchener stitch written, it's like you knit off, purl on. So now we have a purl stitch, so we're going to purl off and then knit on.
And even though all your stitches are on one needle, try and think about them a little bit like if you've ever Kitchenered a toe, you have one set of stitches on the back that look to you like purls because they're on the back needle and you're looking at the wrong side of them, and one set of stitches that look like the knits because they're the front needle, they're facing towards you. And so that's why you're skipping every other one, because you're kind of going back and forth.
Yep. So we would pretend like these knit stitches were on the front needle and this were on the back needle, the purl stitches. So that's why I would purl off and then I would knit on.
The difference between Kitchener stitch and tubular bind off, Kitchener stitch is usually joining knit to knit. And actually here we're also sort of working in ribbing.
Mm-hmm. So there is no, I mean, we're using the Kitchener stitch basically as part of our tubular bind off. Yep, so purl off, knit on. And
because all of our knits and purls are part of the same piece of fabric, it's going to kind of create a rolled over edge on the same piece of fabric, as opposed to a seam that is invisible. Mm-hmm. Like Kitchener stitch, you're basically creating an invisible seam where you're joining two pieces of fabric together.
Mm-hmm. And we could think about it like we're joining two pieces of fabric. Mm-hmm. If we think of our knit stitches as one kind of side of the work and the purl stitches as the other, because we have this kind of seam on the top that rolls over. And on the bottom, it's exactly the same as our tubular cast on. So they just kind of roll over into each other, which is really
and
fun.
This again is very it's mostly for decorative reasons. I mean, it creates a really smooth finish. Mm-hmm. Does this only work for ribbing? I would think you would have to execute it differently, but
yeah.
It doesn't.
So you can use it on other ones, but usually what happens is you'll like rib for just a really small amount. And it looks the best on ribbing. But I'm going to show you, I also always use it for double knitting. And it's basically the same with double knitting. You don't really have to do that setup row. It's kind of already done for you because you're just joining the back. But I just used that the final step, this part where you're Kitchenering on double knitting, and then you get both sides of the knitting that just flow together. So in this case, it really does feel like more of a Kitchener stitch where you're joining both sides of the double knitting. But this has a tubular, cast on that I did here, and then also the bind off, if that helps.
I'm sorry that last part was not super super lengthy. We will again place these on YouTube, so you will be able to watch them again. I will, last week I recommended, if you don't have this book, Cast On Bind Off, you can get this from Knitter's Pride or any bookshop or your local yarn store. It's got all of the techniques, plus great photos, plus it talks about what it's best for and why you would choose it, which was a little bit of what we got asked before. And we are going to take a short break. We're going to take August off, and even though we can't go anywhere fancy, we're going to drink tropical drinks on our couches. And I'm sure Suzanne is going to unpack, and we're going to let Neville take a wee little break from the dye pots, and we're going to be back in September with more Tutorial Tuesdays.
Yay. Yeah, thanks for joining us. This was I forgot to mention, this is like the 4th,
I think?
24th. So awesome. Yep. So come and join us again for the next when we start back up again. And always leave us suggestions if you have a technique that you're just dying to see a quick tutorial on. Then let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Enjoy your August, and we will see you again in September.
Yay.
Night.
Bye.